You're listening to Castle Talk Radio. We're live on the airwaves with Becca and Jessica. Now let's jump into this week's episode.
We are continuing our conversation about early entry at the Disneyland Resort. Last week, we talked about strategies for Disneyland Park. We also explained exactly what early entry is, how you can get it, and what to do while you're at Disneyland. Today, we're going to talk about California Adventure Park strategies. So the first thing that I'm looking at is the list of attractions. We mentioned at Disneyland there are 13, and at California Adventure there are 8. And they are a lot more spread out. So your strategy is going to be so much different at California Adventure. Becca, what's your strategy at California Adventure? Are you even going to early entry at California Adventure?
Yes, I'm going to early entry. For me, though, I don't use that time for as much for rides as I do for other things, and I'll explain that in a minute. But here's the other thing that you have to know about the early entry. A lot of the rides aren't even though they're on the list, they aren't ready open. And Credit Coaster is a big one. Sometimes you have Soarin' is down a lot during that time because they're not ready or something's going on. And I've had several times where Guardians of the Galaxy has been down. So those are the major ones you want to hit. If you're sitting there going, oh, I'm going to use it to do Radiator Springs Racers. No, you're not, because it is not included in the early entry rides. So it's a real hit or miss, which is why I like to use the early entry for getting pictures on Pixar Pier or in that area with nobody in them. It's an amazing time to do that. I do like to use it to kind of be in a general area of where I want to do stuff next time. So Pixar Pier is my favorite to rope drop just because it's so easy to get so much done and then follow it around all the way to where Little Mermaid is through Paradise Garden Park. But the strategy isn't going to be the same. If you really don't want to go, you don't have to, but I do think it's still worth it if you're paying that high price anyways to stay on site. What about you, Jessica? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so strategy at California Adventure for early entry is a lot more difficult, especially depending on your group, because I'm just going to name the rides that are open listed as of today. But again, you can check that on the Disneyland app. So depending on your group, it's going to be really different what you do during early entry. We have Guardians of the Galaxy and Credit Coaster. We have The Little Mermaid, Mater's Junkyard Jamboree, Monsters Inc., Soarin', and Web Slingers. So those different attractions, we have some that can appeal to everyone, like Web Slingers, Monsters Inc., and Mater's, just to name a few. But if you're looking to do like thrill rides, you've got Guardians, you've got Credit Coaster, and those are in 2 totally different areas. You can absolutely hit them both, but I would say start with Credit Coaster first, provided that it's open, because Guardians of the Galaxy has a little bit more of a pre-show. That's going to take a little bit more of your time. Or you could flip-flop it, start at Guardians, do Credit Coaster, and then by that time-ish, the park will be open and you can go ahead and do that whole Pixar Pier. I feel like with California Adventure, it's not as rigid because the park is more laid back to me. It has less rides to do. So I think it's not like as hardcore as Disneyland. I would even go to say that if you're staying on property, you might want to just start your early entries only at Disneyland and even sleep in when it's California Adventure Day.
Yeah, if you're going to choose one to sleep in, if your goal is rides. Now that's the other thing. Some people enjoy a quiet park and that's what they want to do. One thing that you could do, but I will tell you this can backfire, is you can do a few rides and then try and get over to beat the regular guests that come in at a regular park opening to Radiator Springs Racers. You can't get in the ride, but you can go to the end of Cars Land and be waiting to. But sometimes it doesn't open at park opening either. So that is very risky. I think for me, I would probably be someone that would try and do Guardians, Web Slingers, and maybe fit in Mater's, and then head over to see if I can get over to that if you want a ride strategy, because those lands are closer together than the other ones. So I think
Yeah.
that one could work maybe.
Yeah, honestly, the biggest problem with California Adventure, either early entry or rope drop, is that they have the most problems with the rides getting started on time in the morning.
Yeah,
That's just the
definitely.
biggest thing. There have been times where I've early entry at California Adventure and literally ended up just wandering because the rides that I wanted were closed. And I'm talking like 2, 3 major attractions. And when
Well,
you're
and we
looking at a
just
list
had
of
that
8.
when we went for Pixar Fest because
Exactly.
we were like, we're going to Pixar Pier. Our whole group was like, we're going to Pixar Pier. Well, Incredicoaster ended up being down, right? And then we were like waiting for Toy Story Mania to open because it is not one of the rides open.
Mhm.
And I had the same thing when I went a couple days before when I got there and had checked into my hotel early enough. Um, and I was trying to do those things. I did get to do Incredicoaster. It was open, but then it went down right after I got off of it, so other people couldn't. And I ended up just kind of wandering the area, doing some pictures, and then I just happened to be at the popcorn stand when it opened and was able to snag some of those cute buckets that we've seen for Pixar Fest. So it worked out for me, but at the same time, it's like, you just don't have much to do in any specific area. And we have a lot of lands that only have 1 or 2 rides in them as well. So it's strategy is always harder, in my opinion, at California Adventure any time of the day.
Mhm. And looking at the attraction list as well, there's only one attraction that currently does not offer Lightning Lane, and that's Mater's. So all of these other ones you could prioritize later on by using Genie Plus. If you don't want to purchase Genie Plus, this is a great time to get in as many of these as possible. Another thing that I use my time for during early entry is mobile ordering like a delicious breakfast and then eating that after. But again, California Adventure fails us there because they don't have the best breakfast options. They did recently introduce breakfast at Smoke Jumpers, which looks very promising. But other than that, where are you headed to breakfast at California Adventure?
Pim's Test Kitchen. That's
Mm-hmm.
about it. I mean, the shawarma. I think one of the shawarmas has is
Yes.
open and things. But as far as like mobile ordering, we're looking at Pim Test Kitchen or Smoke Jumpers. So
Mhm.
I wish they bring it back to Flo's. I loved Flo's breakfast.
Exactly. I feel like it's really missing that Flo's breakfast because you want something a little more like a dine-in experience rather than
Mhm.
like a quick pickup. I often go to the cappuccino cart and get that breakfast burrito, which is fantastic. It's massive. And another thing that would be really good to do during early entry, especially if you have little ones, is get in those smaller kid family friendly rides and then be ready to meet and greet with characters, especially like in the animation building or on Buena Vista
Mhm.
Street right then and there when the park opens.
Yes, that's a great option. I like that. Um, Yeah, I think that's it for California Adventure. It's again this week, though, I want to mention that you can get some free early entry strategies that Jessica and I have put together, and you can get that information down in the show notes of where to go and get those. So definitely take advantage of that because we don't normally give this stuff away for free.
Exactly. And we are working towards getting 50 reviews for Castle Talk Radio podcast. So for that, we have a little game to play. And it is, what is that sound? Here's how it works. If you know this sound or have a guess, leave a review for Castle Talk Radio podcast. And in that review, put your guess for this week's sound. Here we go. Okay, that was our Disneyland Resort sound for this week. Leave a review on Castle Talk Radio podcast and put your guesses in that review. and we'll share the answer next time on Castle Talk Radio. All right, Becca, while people are trying to figure out our Disneyland sound, we have to decide, is early entry worth the price of staying at one of the on-property hotels? I actually do this question with a lot of my readers, but tell me, what's your answer?
My answer is not just for early entry. Like, I wouldn't, if it was like really stretching my budget where I wouldn't be able to buy Genie Plus, or if I want to park hop and I can't now, I wouldn't stay on site just for early entry. For me, I'm going to stay on site if I want to also enjoy the resort. And early entry is just a tool that helps you get stuff done faster. So maybe you can have an afternoon break and lay at the pool, you know? Um, but that would not be a sole factor for me, because you can, especially now that it's every other day in each park, that makes it so you can still get a lot done just by rope dropping when you're staying off site. So no, that wouldn't be the sole factor. I would want to have to stay at the resort and like have that kind of vacation where I want to spend that money. Now, if it's in your budget, go for it 100%. But if it's going to make you lose out on those other things, no, I wouldn't stay just for that.
Yeah, so let me kind of tell you the conversation that I usually have with people. So they've got two hotels that they're looking at. One is going to be a Disney Resort hotel, and one is going to be one that they're usually more comfortable with budget-wise. And kind of the process that we go through, I say, all right, so let's look at the difference here. Say this total difference of staying at the Disneyland Hotel is $400, and you have a 3-day park ticket. So let's look at the math, and we say, is $400 divided by, right, 3 days. So we're going, I'm doing it. Okay, here we go. So that means $133 per day that you're paying for 30 minutes. Does that work for you? Like, can you make that work, right? And say, okay, maybe you even want to fine tune it a little bit more. Okay, $133 for me. I have 5 people in my family. And this is just, numbers that we're playing with. So I'm going to even break it down per person. That's $26 per person to get an extra 30 minutes. Is that worth it for me? And then also, are you positive that you are going to wake up and utilize those 30 minutes? Because otherwise, your cost per person, cost per day is going up exponentially. So it really depends, yes, on your budget, but I like to break it down that way. And then sometimes you're looking at a huge difference where it's like $500 more and you're only going 2 days. So is that $250, and maybe it's just 2 of you for that 30 minutes, then you've got $125 per person. And whew, that's a lot of money.
And of course, it depends what hotels you are comparing it to as well. Obviously, if you are looking at somewhere like the Suncoast, it's a tiny bit farther away, so it makes it a lot more budget friendly. That's going to be a bigger difference. But sometimes when you're staying at my personal favorite hotel, the Courtyard Anaheim theme park entrance, because it has a water park, that one can be really spendy, especially in the summer.
Exactly.
And the difference is like very minimal. So definitely look, I think when when you're looking at Suncoast versus there, it's easier to make the decision than when you're looking at like Courtyard versus there, where it's a smaller difference. But definitely, and like I said though, don't fear if you are not staying on site, because I actually recently did a strategy test for rope drop for off-site guests. So when park opens, and I tested the same strategy 2 days in a row. One day where people beat me because they were doing early entry, and the other day they weren't. And I was actually kind of shocked because I got more rides done on the early entry day where people had already been in the land than I did on the other day, only by like one ride. But it was,
Let's make this clear. If you're listening and you're tuning out because you're doing something else, listen to this. This is huge, this secret that Becca is spilling, because people want to know, when they are not using early entry, which park should they start at? Basically, Becca is telling you she has done the tests. She has done it every which way and that. And the answer is, if you are staying off-site, should you start at an early entry park or a non-early entry park? What's the answer?
It doesn't matter.
There you have
They were
it.
so close. I got one extra ride in on early entry day. Where it does tend to make a little bit more difference is if you're trying to rope drop Radiator Springs Racers on an early entry day. And then it does make a difference if you're trying to start over in Adventureland and
Galaxy's Edge.
Frontierland, and
Okay.
I mean, not even really Galaxy's Edge, because on those days I found on those other lands, the lands that were closed during early entry, that when I went on an early entry day, all the people that had finished Fantasyland and Tomorrowland were now heading over there. So it made a bigger difference there. But if you're trying to knock out
Smart.
Fantasyland or Tomorrowland, it didn't make a difference. It really didn't. You could,
Mhm.
and then at California Adventure, no difference except for Guardians and trying to get rope drop Radiator Springs Racers so you don't have to pay for individual or single
Okay,
rider.
cool. Yeah, and we did the parks on the same day as early entry with no early entry in March. And my group was like, why are the lines so long to get into that other park? And ours was just a walk-in. Well, because most of the people had planned their days to the opposite park. So Becca is telling you that her tests show either way, you're basically going to get on the same number of attractions. And I am telling you that it doesn't matter, but you might experience more of a delay at the ticket gates, just going through the turnstiles. Either way,
At the park that doesn't have early entry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So many nuances, so many things to learn. So play it again or play it for your party who's going with you so that everybody has the information, not just you. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening to us on Castle Talk Radio, and we'll see you real soon at Disneyland.